Have you ever felt like you were at the end of the line? Like everything had lost its meaning, yet something deep inside still insisted on keeping you breathing? Megan knew that feeling all too well. At 27, she'd once dreamed of so many things. A cozy little sewing shop, slow afternoons with her husband, a steady faith to carry her through the rough days. But at that moment, all of it seemed gone. All that was left was a messy bed, a tired body, and a silent soul. She spent her days between the pillow and the ceiling, like the world outside was a place she no longer had a pass to. Daniel, her husband, still made breakfast, still remembered to put fresh flowers in the jar by the living room window. But even he was starting to run out of ways to help. The love was still there, but he didn't know how to reach her anymore. Megan avoided mirrors, avoided her phone, avoided her own faith. The prayers that once came naturally now felt embarrassing. She felt unworthy of talking to God, like he only listened to people with light in their eyes. And she could barely keep hers open. Social media kept spinning. Friends celebrating new jobs, pregnancies, trips. Meanwhile, Megan couldn't even get out of bed. Contrast stung. The comparison was constant. Even Daniel, with all his kindness, felt distant now. They still loved each other, but that love was buried beneath a kind of exhaustion neither of them could name. Then, one quiet evening, she stared at the ceiling and barely whispered, "If I'm supposed to keep going, show me a sign." But no answer came. No light through the window. No booming voice to shatter the silence. All she heard was the sound of her own breathing. Steady, present, real. And for a moment that was enough. For the first time in a long time, she realized she was still here. Still breathing. And even if it wasn't the sign she expected, maybe it was the only one she truly needed. What about you? Have you ever been through a moment when just breathing was all you had left? Share with me below. Sometimes saying it out loud is the beginning of a whole new story. The next morning, Megan woke up with the same heaviness in her chest. But something felt different. Maybe it was because she had slept a few solid hours, or maybe it was that sound from the night before. Her own breathing, still echoing softly inside. She didn't make plans. Didn't force herself to spring up full of energy. She just sat on the edge of the bed, opened the window, and let the morning air touch her face. That's it. But in that moment it felt like everything. Daniel noticed the change. Saw the open window, the blanket folded. He didn't say anything, but his eyes lingered on her just a little longer. He made her some tea and placed it on the side table. She gave a quiet nod. The house was still quiet, but now the silence didn't feel as heavy. Megan sat down, picked up an old notebook from the shelf, and wrote a single line. "Today I got up." Then she stared at the words like they were a tiny miracle. 'Cause they were. That afternoon, she found a small note stuck to the wardrobe door. Daniel's handwriting, firm, simple. "You're here. That's enough." She held the paper for a few minutes. Didn't know whether to cry or smile. Ended up doing both at once. In the days that followed, writing became part of her rhythm. Short sentences. Loose feelings. Sometimes hope, sometimes just facts. "I heard a bird today. I took a calm shower. I didn't cry today." Daniel started leaving more notes. "I'm with you, even on the quiet days. Your pain doesn't scare me. You're still the one I love." Little messages hidden in unexpected places. Between towels, in the kitchen cupboard, behind the mirror. Quiet seeds taking root in Megan's heart. And even though she still couldn't pray like before, she started silently saying thank you. Her faith, once dimmed, was flickering back, not in loud declarations but in soft sighs. Have you ever experienced something like this? A comeback too small for others to notice, but massive inside of you? Share it. Sometimes your story is the spark someone else needs just to breathe again. One afternoon, while digging through an old closet, Megan found an old devotional. The cover was worn, the pages slightly yellowed. She didn't know why, but something pulled her to open it. She flipped through randomly, and her eyes landed on a verse highlighted in faded ink. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." She read it slowly, once, 3 times. Then she closed the book and held it against her chest. That little line hit a place in her that had been numb. And for a moment, she allowed herself to believe. Maybe God was still near. That evening, she stepped outside for a short walk. Nothing planned. Just wanted to feel the air again. She passed familiar streets that somehow looked different now. At a nearby park, she sat on a wooden bench and just observed. Dog chased dry leaves. An elderly woman walked by carrying a bag of bread, and as their eyes met, she smiled gently and said, "You have a quiet glow. Don't lose it." Megan froze for a second. Those random words felt like they were meant just for her. "I still glow," she thought. The question lingered, warming her chest. She returned home changed. Not healed, not euphoric, but with a new realization. God hadn't shouted at her. He hadn't sent dramatic signs. He'd whispered through details. In that woman's words. In a forgotten devotional verse. In Daniel's quiet kindness. In each breath still filling her lungs. In the days that followed, Megan started tending to small things. She organized books, watered a long-forgotten plant, lit a candle just to watch the flame dance. Not out of obligation but out of a need for beauty. She realized that when she placed love into small things, something inside her realigned. The pain was still there, but now there was room for light too. And that made all the difference. Have you ever noticed God in the little things? In a word, a gesture, a quiet moment? Tell me. Sometimes it's those details that save our days without us even realizing. That night, while having dinner in silence, Megan let out a laugh. It was something small. Daniel had spilled water on his own shirt while pouring a glass. But that laugh, so brief and unexpected, felt like a breeze through the house. He looked up surprised, then laughed too. They sat there with shy smiles and sparkling eyes, like rediscovering a forgotten language. Laughing together felt like something they'd lost. And now, even just for a few seconds, it was back. Megan realized maybe it wasn't that the pain was gone, but that life was finding its way back in. Over the next few days, they started taking short walks together, side by side, not talking much, just walking in sync. One night, while watching the sunset at the end of the street, Megan said, "I don't feel ready, but I think I want to try doing something with my hands." Daniel simply nodded, smiling. The next day, she pulled out some fabric scraps she'd been keeping for years. She sewed a small piece. Simple. Not for sale. Just to create. And when she finished, something clicked into place inside her. She posted a picture on social media with the caption, "This is me, learning how to breathe again." She didn't expect likes. Didn't want advice. Just needed to document it. But comments came. Not many, but real. One woman wrote, "Your post got me out of bed today." Another said, "I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Thank you for being real." Megan read each message with tears in her eyes. Just weeks ago, she couldn't leave the bed. Now, somehow, she was hope for someone else. Without trying. Without pushing. Just by being someone, breathing, feeling, and starting again. That same week, Daniel did something she never saw coming. He gathered every note they'd written, hers and his, and taped them all up on a wall in their living room. Mural. A patchwork of phrases, memories, and quiet breaths of life. When Megan saw it, she stopped in her tracks. Stood there, hand to her mouth, eyes full of tears. Each piece of paper was a reminder that, even in silence, they'd made it. Together. And that their love, though bruised, was still here. Steady. Breathing with them. Have you ever lived a moment like that? When love didn't shout, but somehow still said everything? Tell me. Maybe your silence is speaking louder than you think. As the days went on, Megan found new meaning in helping again. Not in big ways but through small gestures. An elderly neighbor mentioned a torn dress, and Megan offered to fix it. She spent the morning sewing in silence, tea by her side, soft music in the background. When she returned the mended piece, the woman smiled and said, "You have hands that heal." Megan carried those words with her all day. 'Cause somehow they were true. Her hands were creating again, serving, expressing. Later, she was invited to a small women's group at a local church. She hesitated, almost said no. But Daniel gave her a calm look that said, "Go. Just listen." So she did. Sat in the back. Didn't say much. Just listened. Stories of women, familiar pain, silent battles she knew too well. One shared about her struggle with anxiety. Another about feeling empty even surrounded by people. Megan listened with an open heart and realized she wasn't alone in her brokenness. And that brought peace. That night, she laid on the couch, staring at the ceiling. Daniel sat beside her. They didn't speak. It was a different silence. One full of things understood but unspoken. Megan knew she had crossed something. She wasn't done. But she had made it past the darkest part. The light was still fragile, but it was enough to keep going. In the following days, other women began reaching out. With questions, even confessions. Megan didn't have all the answers. But she had something no one could take: truth. She spoke honestly, shared her story simply. And that was enough. Without knowing it, she was becoming a guide. Not because she knew everything, but because she'd made it through. Because she chose to keep breathing. Daniel seemed lighter too. He started working on an old project he'd abandoned. Cooked with more joy. Walked with more peace. They weren't trying to return to who they once were. They were discovering who they could be now. And that was even more beautiful. Have you learned that too? That starting over isn't about going back, but about turning what's left into something new. Share with me. Sometimes your quiet rebuilding is exactly what someone needs to start picking up their own pieces. One Sunday morning under a clear sky, Megan woke up early, tied her hair back with a scarf, slipped on a light coat. She packed a fresh notebook, a bottle of water, and stepped out quietly. Daniel was still asleep. She left a note on the kitchen table. "Today, I'm going to the top." She knew he'd understand. She walked slowly to the beginning of a nearby trail. The sun was still rising, and the morning air smelled like new beginnings. Every step on the dirt path felt like a confirmation. She was here. Not like before. But in a way she'd never been, present. Awake. Breathing with purpose. At the top, she sat on a rock and let the wind rush over her face. Closed her eyes and listened. To the birds. Trees. The sound of her own heart. She felt peace. Not the kind that comes with answers or promises, but a deep certainty. She knew her way back now. She opened the notebook and wrote, "I'm still here. And that's enough." Then stared at the words like a prayer. And it was one that didn't need fancy phrasing, because it came straight from her soul. On the way down, memories came. The day she couldn't get out of bed. The notes. Tiny victories. The sewing. The conversations. The shared tears. Each memory like an invisible step, building the staircase that brought her to this moment. She realized she had created a new version of herself. Not to impress anyone, but to live more freely. She didn't have to prove anything anymore. Didn't have to be perfect. Just needed to keep going. Because as long as she was breathing, there was a way. When she got home, Daniel was at the door. She smiled before she even got close. He smiled back. That same soft smile from when everything was simpler. They walked in together. The day went on. Nothing extraordinary happened. But to Megan, that was the real miracle. Being alive. Being here. And knowing that God was never absent. He was always present. Even in the silence. Even when everything felt still. It was always Him. Patiently stitching back the pieces that once seemed lost. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who might be waiting for a sign, and forgot they're still breathing. And if you want to keep receiving messages like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking this journey of faith and hope with us. Because in the end, starting over is never too far. For someone who's still alive.